The story begins on a giant ship in the middle of the ocean. A group of mercenaries suddenly launches a secret raid. Brandon had just glanced through the ship's compartment when he immediately sensed something unusual. The whole team quickly found itself surrounded by the enemy. Faced with weapons pointed straight at them, Brandon and his teammate Zero still maintained an astonishing calm. With just a few brief tactical signals, the two immediately understood each other and acted together to subdue the opponents. In a short time, the forces on the ship were cleared out. But right as they prepared to continue their mission, another wave of attack suddenly struck. Out at sea, another large ship had appeared at some point, its heavy fire pouring down from the deck like rain. Brandon immediately ordered Zero to enter the control room to shut down the engines and find a flare gun, while he himself grabbed his weapon, left the cover, and searched for an ideal shooting position. Despite the spreading pain, Brandon quickly set up an observation point, yet the thick sea fog and his weakening condition gradually reduced his vision. Still, as a top sniper, Brandon did not rely only on sight, he also used his hearing. He closed his eyes and focused on listening to every movement around him. The sound of bullets tearing through the air, the first shot went precisely and hit the target on the enemy's ship. Without stopping, Brandon continued toward the heavy fire position, using sound to locate and lock onto the target while it was reloading. At the same moment, Zero had also found the flare gun. Brandon immediately signaled to fire. The bright signal stretched across the sky and fell accurately onto the opposing ship, igniting the fuel on the deck. Right afterward, a fierce fire erupted with a deafening explosion. The ship carrying the heavy weapons was completely destroyed. In that fragile moment, a sudden beam of light pierced through the darkness toward him. 1 week later, Zero sat in the interrogation room facing the head of the CIA, Gabriel Stone, who set a limit. "You have exactly 5 minutes to explain what happened out at sea that day." After a few seconds of consideration, Zero decided to recount the entire incident. But Gabriel Stone seemed uninterested in the sequence of events. He only wanted to know whether Brandon was still alive and where he was. Zero hesitated for a moment but still told the truth. After the sea attack, they were luckily rescued by an acquaintance of the submarine commander. A helicopter had taken Brandon to safety, while Zero was ordered to return to GRIT headquarters to report. However, this operation had caused too much shock. It was not only discovered by the Costa Verde government, but quickly became an international scandal. Despite strong objections, Zero was still hooded and taken to a remote warehouse. There, he saw an unexpected person, an old man who left him stunned as if reliving an old memory. Not long after, Costa Verde's Prime Minister, Roman, publicly announced that they had evidence of the US illegally sending GRIT to infiltrate and eliminate a contractor along with more than 100 soldiers. He warned that there would be retaliatory action. He secretly nurtured a mercenary force called Iron Legion and linked up with international arms dealers, creating a major threat to the South American region. Not long after, Iron Legion received a new mission to track down Brandon, who had luckily survived. The employer emphasized that he must be captured alive to maximize political value. The leader, Ares, confidently declared that for Iron Legion, tracking down one individual in Costa Verde was simple, as long as the payment was large enough. He demanded 1 million USD upfront and another 5 million upon completion, refusing any form of cryptocurrency. All transactions would be in cash. At the same time, Brandon was hiding in an abandoned base in Central America. His teammates called to warn him that Costa Verde had placed him at the top of its most wanted list. Even the US government had turned its back and issued an international warrant on charges of terrorism. He showed no surprise, as if he had already anticipated this outcome. Brandon instructed the GRIT members to lie low and await orders. But right as the call ended, he heard a strange sound. Brandon immediately hung up, grabbed his weapon, and moved toward the door in a state of alert. The person who appeared was unexpectedly Zero, which made him breathe a sigh of relief. But the person who stepped in afterward left him even more stunned. It was his father, Thomas, whom he had not seen in a long time. Father and son embraced each other with emotion. After hearing the explanation, Brandon learned that Gabriel Stone had once been Thomas's observer. When he found out the White House was preparing to abandon GRIT, he had reported the news and arranged Zero's rescue. Thomas wanted to take his son to South America, where he had strong enough connections to protect the whole team. However, this proposal met strong opposition. Brandon and Zero did not want to live in hiding forever. They put forward a bold plan to cooperate with the Phoenix rebel army to overthrow Roman, thereby clarifying the entire GRIT matter. Brandon quickly contacted the leader, Sandy. She informed them that they had important information. Roman was implementing a secret project in the mountains that could affect the border area. A reconnaissance team had been sent, but had not yet reported results. Sandy invited Brandon to lead a team to join forces, affirming that if the two sides cooperated, nothing could stop them. Nevertheless, Brandon determined that they should not show themselves yet. If discovered by the Costa Verde authorities, it would unintentionally give Roman a reason to inflame international tension. Right afterward, an old acquaintance, Angel, also appeared and continued to persuade him. She explained that this was the election period in Costa Verde, but the candidate list contained only Roman. No one dared to oppose him. If no one stepped up to stop him, the entire country would fall completely into his hands. Hearing this, Brandon frowned slightly and then agreed to meet Sandy. Afterward, Thomas used his connections to purchase a shipment of equipment. The whole group quickly packed and loaded it onto a truck. Brandon still held the view that they should only provide fire support and that returning to Costa Verde required long-term calculation. Now was not the right time. Yet just as the two sides were preparing to meet, the rebel forces suddenly suffered a major setback. The attackers were Roman's Iron Legion. They quickly overpowered and swept the base. Sandy and Angel fought fiercely, neutralizing most of the enemy, but the rebel forces still suffered heavy losses and only a few survived. As they prepared to withdraw, they were finally subdued. The news quickly reached Brandon. Watching the chaotic scene on the screen, he gritted his teeth to suppress his anger. What surprised him even more was that the Iron Legion leader, Eris, deliberately appeared before the camera to taunt. "I hope you enjoyed the show, Brandon." To locate Brandon's hiding place, Eris used every means to pressure Sandy and the others, even sowing discord within the group by blaming Brandon for putting them in this situation. But Sandy remained unshaken and refused to reveal Brandon's whereabouts. On the other side, Gabriel Stone received new information more than 50 rebel members had been eliminated from the fight in the attack. Sandy, Angel, and Lauren were being held as hostages. Brandon grew extremely anxious and blamed himself. If he had not made that call, their location would not have been exposed. "This is our fault. We wanted to help, but it backfired." Brandon wanted to make amends by finding a rescue plan, but Zero bluntly pointed out that this was exactly Iron Legion's goal, to use the hostages to lure them back to Costa Verde. Even though he understood this clearly, Brandon did not change his decision. Fortunately, Gabriel Stone brought positive news. The remaining rebel forces were on their way to join up. Once combined, they could reorganize into a stateless strategic force with the available equipment, thereby increasing the chances of rescue. Gabriel Stone's plan was quite reasonable, so Brandon temporarily set aside his reckless idea. Not long after, the remaining forces arrived. Brandon and Zero went out to greet them. Earlier, they had said they would bring a secret weapon, codenamed Phoenix, but it turned out to be their old teammate Nova. After a few greetings, they quickly got down to business. Nova brought new information. Costa Verde had almost no middle class left. Roman had taken control of most of the country, making the wealth gap increasingly extreme. Assets were concentrated in his hands, and he had closed the borders and banned all trade under the pretext of self-sufficiency, but in reality, this only weakened the nation further. After listening, Brandon clearly understood Roman's goal. He did not want to open the borders because he was nurturing ambitions to expand territory into other countries. And to achieve that, conflict was inevitable. The situation grew more tense. This time they discovered bad news through the media. The three, Sandy, Angel, and Lauren, would be publicly executed in 72 hours. On the other side, Roman personally went to the detention facility. Continuing to apply pressure and tempt Sandy, he declared that he would lead Costa Verde into a new era and then invited Sandy to join. After speaking, Roman took out a personal weapon, removed all the bullets except one, and signaled his subordinate to approach Sandy. "I see potential in you. You could become a leader. Follow me, and I will make your name immortal." However, despite the mounting pressure, Sandy still refused to betray Brandon. Roman could only leave in anger. Almost at the same time, Zero went to Nova, who was training alone, and tried to persuade him to join the rescue operation, but was firmly refused. It turned out that instead of merely removing Roman, Nova wanted to change Costa Verde's entire system. Removing one leader would not solve the root problem. It would only create a power vacuum for someone else to fill. What needed to change was the whole system. In the end, the two parted in a tense atmosphere. Meanwhile, Brandon stayed up all night studying the prison's blueprints. He contacted Pete, a skilled hacker, and asked him to find more detailed drawings. But even after careful examination, Brandon still could not find a breakthrough point. Worse, Pete brought bad news. The person who designed the firewall for Roman was such an expert that even he could not trace the identity. Pete seriously warned Brandon to be extremely cautious in all future actions. After ending the call, Zero entered the room to prepare. The two continued to simulate the plan to find the optimal solution. Given the overwhelming disparity in forces, a direct assault was clearly not feasible. At that exact moment, Gabriel Stone walked in and recalled Thomas's experience. "If you cannot find a way in, think about where you can block them instead." Hearing this, Brandon suddenly saw the light. He looked back at the blueprints, quickly built a rescue plan in his mind, and proposed an effective strategy. Instead of attacking directly, they would ambush the prisoner convoy on the road. This surprise tactic would surely leave Roman no time to react. The plan was deemed feasible by everyone, but Keller raised a question. "There are many routes to the detention facility. How will we know which one they will take?" Brandon confidently replied, "It doesn't matter where they start from. We only need to lead them into the ambush area." Keller immediately took on the task of luring them, promising to use her system to direct the convoy. With support from the brother and sister, Brandon felt even more certain. He and Zero went to the equipment depot to select weapons. At the same time, Thomas also returned to the base, determined not to let his son take the risk alone. Only 3 people. 3 is enough, every shot will be accurate. Everyone quickly assigned tasks. Keller gave Brandon a positioning device for remote support. Thomas took his familiar Shase 69, assembled it smoothly, and felt the fighting spirit rise. When Brandon gave the order, the operation officially began. On the other side, although she had not revealed information about Brandon, Sandy was still psychologically affected and believed he would not come to rescue her. The next morning, the 3 were loaded onto the prisoner convoy heading to the center. On the surface, everything remained calm, but as soon as the vehicles entered the boundary area, they fell into Keller's tracking system. She quickly identified the license plates, infiltrated the positioning system, and directed the convoy into the ambush zone. The new route became unusually winding. The drivers began to feel uneasy but still trusted the navigation system. Not long after, Brandon received a report that the convoy was only 2 minutes from entering the ambush area. When the countdown reached 30 seconds, Brandon's voice sounded over the radio. Overwatch 1 is in position. I will handle the lead vehicle. Thomas took responsibility for the armored vehicle, while Zero aimed at the last vehicle. Gunfire erupted immediately. Sandy instantly recognized that Brandon had come to rescue. Iron Legion was pinned down and did not dare to show their heads. They called for reinforcements but received no response. One man who tried to break the encirclement was immediately shot down by Thomas from a high position. Inside the vehicle, fighting broke out. Angel fought fiercely, but her weapon malfunctioned. Sandy and Lauren were pulled out of the vehicle. Zero tried to rush in to rescue them but was stopped by enemy fire. Angel became isolated yet still counterattacked, using the enemy's own weapons to take them down. Zero was also overwhelmed. Fortunately, Brandon provided timely long-range support. Thomas spotted Sandy's position and immediately shot the man restraining. The battle gradually reached its conclusion. The 2 sniping positions of father and son performed at maximum effectiveness. Thomas controlled close range. Brandon eliminated targets from afar. Sandy and Angel escaped to safety one after another. The last enemy charged into close combat with Brandon. He overpowered the opponent with his fighting skills, but discovered his magazine had fallen out. At that moment, Thomas ordered him to withdraw, but the enemy would not let go. Brandon seized a gun and finished him off. On the other side, Lauren also counterattacked, but could not match the Iron Legion leader. Fortunately, Zero rushed in, kicked the enemy's weapon away, and together with Lauren finished him with an axe. The immediate threat was resolved. Zero quickly led the 2 wounded away, but a new danger appeared. Nova discovered a large force surrounding Brandon's area. He had just issued a warning when the connection was cut off. The rescue team lost remote support and had to manage on their own. At that moment, a vehicle stopped right in front of Brandon and Thomas. Both were safe. Brandon finally breathed a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Zero and the others had reached the pickup point on the rooftop. Gabriel Stone was already waiting with a helicopter. But they realized Sandy and Thomas's father-son pair had not yet arrived. Everyone began to worry. On the other side, Brandon told Sandy to drive according to the route he indicated. They were about to leave the urban area. But no one could have guessed that Sandy would drive the vehicle onto a broken bridge. You have already made your choice, Brandon Beckett. And so have I. I once had high hopes for you. But now it is too late. Seeing Roman step out of the car, Brandon immediately understood everything. It was clear that Sandy had been drawn to the opposing side. In her heart, there was now only resentment and hatred toward him. After a period of silence, the father and son stepped out of the vehicle together. Before acting, Thomas reminded Brandon to always know humility and remain vigilant in the future. As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled the trigger. At the same time, Roman's bodyguards also opened fire. 2 bullets flew out almost simultaneously. One grazed Roman's neck, the other struck Thomas's arm. When the bodyguard prepared to shoot again, Roman immediately stopped him. It was not because he wanted to spare Thomas's life, but because he wanted to execute him personally. Yet amid the sound of gunfire filling the sky and Brandon's pained screams, the story of Sniper No Nation came to a close. In the ending scene, Brandon was locked in a dark room. Sandy mocked him for not knowing his own limits, but there was not the slightest surrender in Brandon's eyes. These lackeys cannot hold me forever. One by one, I will make you pay double. The story of Sniper No Nation is still not over. Brandon's journey of revenge will certainly continue.